Welcome to A Life in Black and White. Patsy Nomvete was born in Austell, Georgia. She was a special educator for 11 years. She married Thozi Nomvete in 2003 in East London, South Africa. After returning from South Africa, Patsy began pursuit of her PhD in special education at Georgia State University. At present, she is preparing to conduct her dissertation research with adolescent struggling readers. Thozi Nomvete was born in South Africa of parents who were members of the Methodist Church of South Africa. His father and grandfather were ministers of that church. His great-grandfather was an evangelist. Thozi has studied in South Africa, Swaziland, Lesotho, and Nigeria. He has worked in Swaziland and South Africa and presently in the United States. He came to the United States in 2002 as a scholar in residence at Auburn University of Montgomery, Alabama. It was at that time that Thozi met Patsy.
I grew up in the Deep South during civil rights and all that that entails as a white person. Black people were quite separate from my life until I was well into my teenage years. I probably did not even know one black person. And I was, of course, taught to, from my own parents taught me to respect all people, but I didn't have much of an opportunity to interact with anyone except people like myself. So as I was growing up, I also was raised in the Baptist church, Southern Baptist, and going through high school years, I became troubled as I learned more about other religions and how many times the same message that Jesus was teaching was the message that Muhammad taught and other religions. And so in my youthful arrogance, I said, either they're both right or they're both wrong. Well, in my youthful arrogance, I decided they were both wrong and that we had fabricated God for our own well-being. And I actually kind of turned away from religion when I was 18. After about 3 years of being away from God, I realized that I was quite unhappy. And I know I had a roommate in college. I was at Florida State, and she was Catholic. And I used to walk her down to Mass, and then I'd go back, and when she came out, I would walk her home. And what I noticed was when the people came out of Mass, they seemed happier than I was. And I thought, okay, maybe God, what is this God thing? Let me just think about it a minute. So I just set up a little prayer. I said, God, if you exist, let me know. And I just went on with my life, being unhappy. It took a few years for God to let me know slowly, and that seems to be how, in my life at least, God unfolds things, not immediately, but over time an evolution happened that, okay, I accepted God. Especially when I had my first child. I wanted to know, what do I teach this child? I accepted that God existed, but then that same question came back. If they're either all right or they're all wrong. And so I said, if there is a God, then they must be connected. So then I set up another little prayer. God, show me how they're connected. And I let it go. And interestingly enough, slowly Baha'i started kind of filtering into my life. And when I heard the Baha'i message, I thought, wow, I've never heard this before, that's it. And I was a college student, and we were probably sitting enjoying ourselves, drinking maybe an afternoon beer or something, and this Baha'i was not drinking. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And so but I let it go, and then I tried to find it, and I couldn't remember the name of it, and then more Baha'is came into my life. And slowly, I was taught by lovely Baha'is, and eventually, I came to see that all religions are connected, and that there is one religion. In my thoughts when I was an 18-year-old, were the truth. I just did not have the guidance to understand that God has unfolded all of these religions over time for the needs of the human race. So I became a Baha'i, but then it wasn't really a joyous moment for me. It was like a moment of responsibility, because knowledge carries with it responsibility. And I want a friend, Frankie, to share a prayer. And this prayer, if you would come up, Frankie, and just share this prayer and why this prayer specifically laid on me a responsibility.
O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. All are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all, dost shelter all, conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thy kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful. Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind. Abdul Baha.
As I said, I grew up in a segregated society, and the friends I had were white. The family that I knew were white. And so I felt a responsibility to find out how to be a family to everyone. And at that time, I was still kind of an angry young woman about injustice. You know, there's all the kind of injustice, and the only people I was prejudiced against, I felt, were people who were prejudiced. And so I certainly didn't have any problems, but other people, those racist people, did. And then I read something from Shoghi Effendi.
What you're actually wanting to speak to is the subconscious. Shoghi Effendi speaks to a subconscious feeling of superiority that is experienced by white Americans, and calls on the American believers to take part in bringing that down.
And Shoghi Effendi actually kind of calls on the black and the white. They each have responsibility, and the black race to let go of suspicion, and the white race to let go of their, at times, subconscious sense of superiority. Right. Well, that really hit me, because it didn't say anything about making sure other people were not prejudiced. It was talking about our own selves. And then the part that said subconscious, well, how do I know if it's there, if it's subconscious? So that really kind of disturbed me a little bit. So I started kind of thinking about myself. And one day, a thought came to me, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but I'm just going to be very honest, because that's all that we can do when we want to move forward. And that is, somebody mentioned a Baha'i, a black doctor. This thought went through my mind that said, he may not be as good as a white doctor. And I caught the thought. You know, many times we have caught thoughts, and we don't know they're there, but I kind of hung on to it. And I said, where did that come from? Why did I think that? And then I went back to this notion of unconscious sense of superiority. And then I thought, hey, maybe I need to work on myself and not worry about all these other people. And so I had a friend who was a new Baha'i as well, Sheila Parham, and we were in a rural region, and we started talking. Well, how can we get to this unconscious sense of superiority if all we know are white people? And so we thought, let's work at getting to know black people. And so we thought, well, how are we going to do that? So we had this plan to bring the black churches and the white churches together in a social context, and that we could facilitate that and promote friendship, and we would benefit at the same time. And this actually worked. It's still going in this Cornelia, and for years we got together for picnics and we became friends, and we worked at becoming friends and understanding each other, because we cannot be one family if we're separate, and we cannot be change ourselves. We cannot change society unless we change our own hearts. So that's what we worked at. So when that works up to when I met Thozi, because of the work I had really tried to do, I could view him first as a human being and second as a black person, rather than first as a black person and second as a human being. And so we'll talk about that in a minute, of how that meeting took place. But that's where I was at that point in my life.
So your Baha'i history kind of set you all up for what would become your meeting. But even though we sometimes think of the question, that most difficult question of how to overcome prejudice, from whatever perspective we're standing at, right? So if we are, of African descent, then we might be thinking that the problem is all over on this side, and if we're standing on the side of Europeans, we might think, well, all the problem is over on the other side. You spoke to that quote from the Guardian, Shoghi Effendi, which speaks to the fact that each of us has a role to play in ending prejudice. And I think, Thozi, if you talk a little bit about your Baha'i experience, and then kind of maybe you even had some prejudice that you had to overcome as well.
I think so. Here I was born into the family. I'm the only child, and my father is a minister of religion in the Methodist Church, and I believe he was the first, or among the first, Africans to get a degree first before becoming a priest in the Methodist Church. But I don't know the facts, but I know that at least my mom would say he must be one of the first to have a degree before becoming a minister of religion. Now, as it was mentioned, my grandfather was also a minister of religion in the Methodist Church. My great-grandfather was an evangelist in the Methodist Church. So we have a line of very prominent people in the Methodist Church, and here I come along, the only child. God bless them, my parents never forced me to do anything, but I could just feel that if I were to say I'd like to be a priest, they would be so happy. And I would hear my mom say, you're going to get it's a calling, becoming a priest is a calling, and I thought, maybe I'm going to get a phone call, to tell me that, you need to go this way. So, grew up as a Methodist, and my father, because of apartheid, decided that I should go to high school in Swaziland. There was a school there called St. Christopher's High School, which was built by Anglicans specifically for South Africans who could come out of South Africa. So I went to that school. There were a whole bunch of South African guys there that I grew up with, and I was there for 5 years, and that school was Anglican, and so for the 5 years that I was there, I was an Anglican. But each time I go home, we would go 3 times, a year. It had a 3-term system. So when I'm at home, I'm a Methodist. When I'm at school, I'm an Anglican.
And what were some of the differences there?
I didn't care.
Okay, so it all seemed the same to you.
Well, the Anglicans have a very, well laid out process of worship. And the Methodists have their own well laid out process of worship. And I really didn't care. It was all God, it was all Jesus, and so I couldn't go into South African universities because I had schooled in Swaziland. So then I heard 2 years later that the friends of mine who had been in Swaziland are now in Lesotho. I thought, oh, Daddy, can I go to Lesotho? And I didn't know why I needed to go to college, but Daddy, can I go to college? So lo and behold, I met some of them there, and I became a student there. Now there, I thought to myself, well, which one should I go to? And I decided, well, United Church Congregation, that's Presbyterian. So I said, oh, okay, I'll go here, you know. So, so while I was in college for 4 years, I was going to the United Church Congregation. And then I worked for 1 year in Swaziland as a teacher, and I came back to Lesotho to a school which did not have a religious affiliation. And when I got to that school, I said, aha, I want to find out about religion. You know, because it's a question that I couldn't really ask my parents, because he's a priest, you know. You know, so so when I was now at this school, I'm working, I'm a young man, maybe 24 years old, and I said, God, which one of these should I go to? So I really started thinking, okay, Methodist. I said, I don't know much about Methodist church. My parents were Methodist. It wouldn't be fair for me to call myself a Methodist. Okay. Anglican. If your father didn't take you to Swaziland, how would you be even thinking about the Anglican church? Okay, that falls out of the way. United Church Congregation, well, if you hadn't gone to college and you went to that church, how would you be knowing about it? I said, no, all of these are incidental issues, you know. If my father had been a Roman Catholic, should I be a Catholic now? You know, if he had been a Zionist Christian church member, should I be? You know, I said, God, hey, oh, I'm getting confused here. Which one of these should I go to, and why? God, I'm confused. Now, while I'm confused, I'm not going to go way over. I'll stay away from them. And I was quite happy, you know, not going to church. All right? And of course, one of my secret prayers was, I know you're there, but I don't know which one to go. Lo and behold, a year later, you see, as a bachelor, I would take my clothes to a lady who would say, have you met the Baha'i? I said, what? She says, Baha'i, have you met? I said, no, I haven't met them. Now I'm thinking, why would I need to meet Baha'i? Anyway, so each time I took my clothes for her to mend and so on, and she would mention Baha'i. And man, so eventually I agreed to go to this meeting where them Baha'is were going to talk, and so to get her off my back, you know, because, you know, in Africa you grow up, you need to respect people that are older than you, even if you know that there's not much they can tell me, but, you know. So that's the attitude I had. You know, I'm just going to go to this Baha'i meeting so that I can, you know, when I take my clothes to her, she doesn't talk about them Baha'i something. Went to this meeting, and to cut a long story short, I went to this meeting, and as this man was talking, I thought he's a bishop, so I switched off. I'm thinking, oh, he's white. What is he doing here in Lesotho? You know, I'm thinking about all of these things. Oh, then the end of the talk, oh, he sits down. Oh, okay. So I come back in. Then I notice something. Somebody here raises a hand, and somebody over here, not that what I thought was a bishop, isn't answering. Someone else is answering. And I thought, wow, now that's the first thing that struck me in a Baha'i meeting, that you can ask intelligent questions. Wow, I had never experienced that. All through my life, what I had heard and experienced was, you go to church, you know, you do what they say, you go out. You come back again, it's a routine, you know. And then the second question was asked, somebody came to me and said, what do you think of the Baha'i faith? I hadn't listened to anything that was happening. You know, I was so embarrassed. I said, Christianity. Oh, so they knew that I couldn't figure out, because all I knew was Christianity. How was it related to Christianity? Out came a book, Thief in the Night, by William Sears, and I thought, wow, it's all here.
So what did you find in that book?
Oh, that book it's a compilation of prophecies from both the Old and the New Testament, attesting to the truthfulness of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, and even give dates which are there in the Old Testament about the future time, and it's there in the New Testament about the future time. For Christians, I would say, wherever it says glory of God, he shall come in the glory of the Father, glory of God, that's Baha'u'llah. Because glory in Arabic or Persian, glory is Baha. And Allah in Persian or Arabic is God. So Baha'u'llah means glory of God. It's all there. You know? So I was happy to read that. And then the second book was How Did the Baha'i Faith Start? You know? And I read the history of how it started, the Babis and Baha'u'llah. And now what struck me with that book was I realized that the first Baha'is were actually coming from the Muslim religion. And I thought, wow, if they can allow themselves to be killed happily because they are stuck with this Baha'i faith, then the religion which they had before must be a religion of God. And I thought, I think I'm a Muslim now.
So you spoke of them getting killed because of their faith. What are you addressing there in the Baha'i history?
I'm addressing when the earthquake comes, you know, the institutions of power that have, you know, accepted and assumed power become very troubled, you know. And so you see that happening throughout religious history. When Christ came, it's the priests that didn't like him, you know, of the old religion. And even Pontius Pilate, the ruler, washed his hands, said, I don't see anything wrong with this guy. But the priest said, Pontius Pilate said, oh, you do whatever you want with him, you know. So Christ really died because the authority to squash his religion really came from the priesthood. The same thing happened now in Iran when the Babi faith, which is the precursor to the Baha'i faith, in 1844, when it started, thousands of Baha'is, of Babis, at the time they were called Babis, thousands of them were killed because the clergy, you know, said, we've got to rough this thing out, we need to get it out of this country. And the government agreed with them, you know. So you've had that kind of upheaval on and off in Iran. Even today, now the government is in cahoots with, well, let me say it's worked very closely with the priesthood. So it's almost one and the same thing, you know. And then you see this kind of very well-organized repression of Baha'is. They're losing their homes and not being allowed to go to college, you know. Not, you know, even at school, they're ostracized and so on and so on. Anyway, so that's the part I'm addressing.
So yeah, so those were the early Baha'is and or Babis.
Yeah. So after reading about that, then I asked them, well, how does it work? Then they gave me a third book, which is Baha'u'llah in the New Era by J.E.S. Lamont. And what I liked about the Baha'i system is no one assumes priesthood. There is no priesthood. Now, coming from this line of an evangelist and a priest, this was mind-blowing to me. Really, could it be true? There is a religion where there are no priests, you know? And I read from that book that actually Baha'is organize themselves into assemblies, and every year they vote for 9 people to be members of that assembly, and that is the source of authority for that community. And then once a year, the Baha'is come together as delegates. They vote for 9 people in the entire country who will be the authority of all Baha'i activities in the country, you know. And then the superstructure is once in 5 years, Baha'is come together in Israel and they choose an international Baha'i council, which is responsible for making sure there's harmony throughout the Baha'i community in the world. And that just blew my mind. You know, when I read all of these things, I said, no, this is a religion for me. And that's how I became a Baha'i.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So you learned about the basic tenets of the Baha'i faith.
Mm-hmm.
Among them, would be the removal of all forms of prejudice,
Yes.
the uniting of all mankind, one religion.
I like that.
And then, of course, you also have the equality of men and women
Yes.
that shows up as well.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how all of these basic tenets, as you're learning about them,
Right.
how are you incorporating all of these in your life?
Now, when I was growing up, to address the racial issue, growing up, I never really believed that whites were different. I always believed that whites are the same. It's just a belief I had, you know. Even though when you go to the bank in South Africa, there are two doors. One is for white, one is for, at that time,
Right.
you know. But I never believed that. It never really bothered me, you know. I could see it happen, but I didn't believe it, you know. So when I became a Baha'i, and there is this thing that all races are really one, and I thought, wow, this is what I've been believing and in my own way doing, without knowing that really I was on track. This is a Baha'i principle that all races are one. And then as far as the men and women are concerned, that now ties me to Patsy.
Being a woman.
And her story, because after coming, as it was said, after coming in 2002 to the United States, then came an opportunity for me to meet Patsy, and Patsy, we started, calling each other over the phone.
Let me tell a little bit of something
Right,
first.
you take over.
I need to set the stage for this.
Yeah.
All right, as life goes on and things happen that we don't expect. I was married for 25 years, and quickly my marriage came to an end. And so I was single, and Baha'is go through a year of patience, and before divorce is granted, and I had gone through my year of patience. And so I just said to God, I said, I have conversations that are out loud. So I said, God, I would like to have a husband, but if you want me to have a husband, here's what I want. And I think you should be very specific when you pray. And what I said was, first,
and I agree.
I said, first of all, I want a Baha'i who loves the faith and wants to serve the faith, so we can serve together. And that Baha'i must have a sense of humor. One is not acceptable without the other. So if he's a good Baha'i and no sense of humor, no thank you. Or if he has a sense of humor and no Baha'i, no. So active Baha'i, good sense of humor, intelligent, and enjoyed conversation. And I don't care what race, but probably not white. And the reason I said that was because of this prayer that Frankie read. And that was that I had this desire to also embody, to show the unity of the humanity through my marriage. And I let it go. And I never worried about it. And so I went to a Baha'i conference, and there was this person from South Africa there performing on stage, singing, and I thought, I've never known anybody from South Africa. Maybe that's when Baha'u'llah sent me. I just had that thought, and I thought, no, that's so silly. He probably had brought his wife here, and so we were. In fact, there was an auction at the Tennessee Baha'i School, and there was a necklace that I wanted to get. It was a nice Baha'i necklace, and all of a sudden it went out of the way, too high, and Steve Hampton had gotten it, and he had connected with Thozi because Thozi was singing one of his songs. And Steve Hampton got it, and I thought, oh, that's nice, and then he went over and gave it to Thozi, whom I didn't know. And I said, that's so nice. He'll probably give it to his wife. I'll fill you in on that later. But so my community had sent me, when I went, my dear friend Pat McMacken said, get people for our firesides. And when I saw Thozi, I thought, he's fresh from Africa, and I know how gracious people are from Africa. If I ask him to come, he won't know that he can say no. So he's perfect. So I went up and I said, could you come to our community for firesides? It's about 4 hours from where you are. And his answer was, sure, I will. And it was so enthusiastic. I almost stepped back and thought, I liked how he said that. He gave me his card, and I went home. I guess we spoke for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of weeks later, I need to call him because we're going to set it up. And so we talked for an hour. I hung up the phone and I said, who is this person I'm in love with? And I even went to my counselor. If you've been married for 25 years and you have a divorce, you do have a counselor. I went to my counselor. I said, I must be very lonely. I've spoken to this man one time, and I think I'm in love with him, and I think I want to marry him. That's very strange. She said, well, you're just thinking of yourself as single. And I said, yes, that's right. So we had to talk again. It happened again. We talked for an hour. I'm in love with him. This happened. Of course, he doesn't know this, of course. He's just talking. And at some point, after a couple of weeks talking, you know how, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I did not plan this to come out of my mouth, but it's as if my mouth was working on its own.
Stop right there. Let me come in now.
Okay.
My mouth is going to work on its own. Now I came to Auburn University, Montgomery, and a friend of mine told me that there's a Tennessee Baha'i Institute over in Mount Eagle, Tennessee. And of course, like she said, I said, sure, I'll go, you know. Lo and behold, the Baha'is take me to the Tennessee Baha'i Institute. And like she said, I'm in the choir, I'm singing, and I, get my keyboard out and so on and so on. And then while I'm on the stage, here comes this lady. All I remember is a white lady came up and asked me about something. And I said, sure, I'll do, She said, could you come up to Gainesville? So I said, sure, I'll come. If it's Baha'i, I'm going there. If you want me to come, I'll come. Here's my card. 3 weeks later, like she said, she calls. I think it was a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. I'm in the office. I'm marking scripts, and we talk for an hour. And my idea is, she's going to report to the Baha'is where she lives, so I need to tell her everything about myself. So, yes, I was born single in my family. I'm alone, I don't have a brother or sister. Yes, I was married before for 10 years, and then I have 3 children out of that marriage. Yes, one of them is serving in Haifa, the eldest boy at that time. He was in Haifa for a year of service, and the other 2 girls are with their mother in South Africa, and yes, so I'm saying all these things about myself, and like you said, I didn't know what was going on. Now, one of these calls, Patsy talks to me.
And I said, someone said, my mouth opened and the words came out. I said, Thozi, I gave a prayer to God, and I said, God, I'd like to have a husband. And I repeated it. If you would like to, I would like to have a Baha'i who's active, sense of humor, one not acceptable about the other, intelligent, enjoys conversation, and I don't care what race. And you seem to be all of these things.
What?
So what was going through your mind, right?
A volcano was shooting up inside of me. This is the first time I had accepted as a Baha'i some years back that men and women are equal.
Yeah.
And now I couldn't understand why was there a volcano shooting up. So all I said was, you're very bold.
And I wasn't sure that was a compliment. But what I said, well, I'm 47, you're 52. It's not that we have that much more time. Why should we play games? Why don't we just see if it works? And if it doesn't, then we're friends. What's the difference?
Yeah, well, maybe we can talk about that later. But, I didn't have an answer to all of these, She challenged me, in the sense that growing up as a South African, you get into this idea that women have a specific role to play in life, and they dare not come out of that, otherwise they're very bad women. And one of the things good women do or do not do is to suggest romance. Now that makes me uncomfortable. So I go to my room and I think, what's the problem? I needed to understand it. And I then realized, this is culture. I said, all right, now what is culture? Culture is something that we're doing this time that was done 100 years ago. And if you go to ask those people 100 years ago, why are you doing this? They'll say, this was done 100 years ago. And you go back and back and back. And I'm thinking, that's what culture is? Well, no wonder people can't get united, because they're hanging on to culture. So I asked myself, Thozi, you've been married 10 years, you've been unmarried for another 10 years, you haven't been married for, so it's 10. You are saying you're going to tell yourself that this lady is bad because she called on the phone and suggested something romantic? It didn't make sense. So once I understood that, I was at peace, but I still didn't want to tell her anything.
But also, one other thing I'd say with my prayer is I do not want to date. Send him so I trip over him. I use those words. I want to trip over him so I just, no. And so when he called me and he would say, what would you say? You would ask if a thing has not been done before. Yeah, if this thing
hasn't been done before, because it's the first time I hear a lady asking for a serious thing.
Is it
serious?
Is it inherently wrong?
Yeah, I asked him, is it in here? So because I have this idea, it must be wrong.
So he's asking me. So I said, well, Thozi, I think you have to ask someone else that question, because if I thought it was wrong, I certainly wouldn't do it. Right. And also, if it were wrong because it wasn't done, then we shouldn't even be talking anyway. If we only do things that have not been done in the past. So you have to ask someone else that question.
That's how she closed our conversation. We started talking about something else.
But I was so happy that he was honest.
Yeah.
Because I thought, this is an important issue for him. And I really accepted that if that's not acceptable, then we can be friends, because I wanted to be who I was and not be put in a box.
So once I resolved that issue that, I'm dealing with culture now, please note that even Baha'is, after becoming Baha'is, they do have issues later on, like I did.
And continue to. Because we're always getting better.
It may be a man's almost unconscious sense of superiority over women.
There you go. So, but it helped that I was a Baha'i, because I said, now doesn't the faith say men and women are equal? Yes, it does say. Now, doesn't she have, do you have a right to suggest something? Yes, I do have a right. Now, why does she have a right to suggest a longer term relationship? Yes, she does have a right. Why? Because men and women are equal. Why should I reserve to myself, the prerogative of being the only one that has the authority to suggest a romantic relationship? So on those grounds, I can say it helped that I was a Baha'i, because at least I could fall back on that. I would say the Baha'i faith teaches, and it's about time, not other people. When I became a Baha'i, I said, looking at all these writings and thinking, hey, this is going to be a wonderful world. I said to myself, the world is going to get better beginning with me. And here, once again, I was, I confronted with that. I said, well, the culture has got to give way for something that can be uniting. And I found that the Baha'i faith does provide something that unites people. And so I had made up my mind, but I didn't tell her. So we arranged for her to come down to Montgomery. She was going to spend a weekend there. She, made her booking at a hotel. And I think I went to Kroger and bought some flowers over there. So as soon as I saw her, I presented her with flowers. Will you marry me?
And then now then he took my breath away. I thought we were going to get together and see how we liked each other off the phone. And so then I was kind of shocked. And I kind of sat down and I said, yes, I'll marry you.
So that was our engagement night in Montgomery. That's why a friend of mine says, you were born in Montgomery.
One thing we did, before he couldn't even remember what I looked like.
No.
He'd only saw me for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
We've only been talking on the phone. But for 6 weeks we talked on the phone, and so we got to know each other's character.
Yes.
And what we did, we fell in love with each other's character and spirit. And nothing else mattered.
That's true.
And so once we saw each other, and he asked. I said yes.
Yeah.
And we went to,
We went to Dexter Avenue Memorial Church the next day. And
Martin
there,
Luther King Jr.'s
Martin
church
Luther
in
King
Montgomery.
Jr. Wow. So that also had a spiritual meaning for me, because here the night before, I'd met this lady. Practically, we had become engaged, and the next day I go to a church, which was on a Saturday actually. It was because you had come down on a Friday. This was a Saturday, so. And at the basement of that church, there I was, went in, there was no one else, and went in there, and I started playing Steve Hampton's tune, "Oh God, educate these children are the plants of the nurture," you know. So, and then we met a friend of yours there.
Reverend Thurman came in, and
Right.
so he was the first one we told we were engaged.
The very first, isn't that significant? You know, for me, these things, they ring bells. The first person that we talked, we informed that we were engaged was a priest.
And then we went to Tuskegee and visited, which was very meaningful to me as well. And then I traveled to South Africa, and we were married in South Africa a few months later in East London. And we went on our honeymoon, and on our honeymoon, he had a necklace on. And I said, "That's the
And
necklace Steve Hampton."
She reminded me of Steve Hampton. And then she told a story, which was, you know, when I was in the room and when I saw Steve Hampton come and give you the necklace, I thought to myself, you tell it.
He's going to give that to his wife. And so he pulled it out and gave it to me, and here it is. And I was right. He did give it to his wife.
He did give it to his
But
wife.
I didn't know I would be the wife.
That's right.
So this is a very special necklace for me.
Oh, yeah.
So Thozi and Patsy, you all have encompassed really a lot of the Baha'i principles in your relationships, the recognition of the Baha'u'llah as the revelation of God for this
Yes.
day, the oneness of humanity,
Yes.
of course the equality of men and women.
Yeah.
And as you now, in your 8th year, I guess, together now? Is it
Oh, yeah.
Ninth.
Ninth.
year together?
In August, it'll be
9 years.
10 years.
Ah, okay.
It'll be 10.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
Since we met.
So what do you do then with that? Okay, you've come together now, you have a very strong foundation, you mutually agree about your love for the faith of Baha'u'llah.
Like she said,
How does it shape your marriage?
there is this urgent obligation to do something for this crumbling world, you know. So, for all of last year, we had a Ruhi class going in our house last year, once a month.
So talk about Ruhi. What was
Ruhi.
going on in these
Yeah.
classes?
So, what was going on in these classes? Like I said to a friend yesterday, what was going on in these classes is that we would invite young people to come and really, in brief, just to come, give them a chance to ask questions for themselves and give them a chance to search for answers for themselves. So it was not a meeting where we're going to ask people to become Baha'i. That's not the issue. Those who want to become Baha'i, fine.
Yeah.
And what we would tell them is, you are going to be reading some passages from the Baha'i faith and other religions, by the way. But we hope when you read and you discuss, you know, with your neighborhood friends, you will try to find answers. We hope this will help you. If you're a Christian, we think you'll be a better Christian. If you're Muslim, you'll be a better Muslim. Because in the end, all religions come from the same source. So this water coming from here is the same as the water coming from there and from all of them. This is all spiritual, you know. So we try to tell them that we are trying to reinforce your spiritual life regardless of what your religion is. If you don't have a religion, that's okay too. You will be a more spiritual person even if you don't have a religion, you know.
Absolutely. So you all are
Yeah.
using that kind of service kind of to cement
Yes.
your lives together.
Yes.
I'm wondering for our friends who are gathered here today, if anyone has any questions for
Right.
Patsy and Thozi,
Right.
any insights that you can glean from their experience or that you'd like to know more about?
while you're thinking of it, I just have one more little thought to share, and that is about, again, our Ruhi service is not just about teaching other people. We are the ones that gain from the youth. And again, this idea of white and black coming together is still a struggle in our society. And let me just share a little insight I have about the European culture that I didn't understand. We would have about 35 youth to our house, African American. And when they're there, their exuberance is wonderful. They would sing, it was so wonderful, but it was very loud. And what I realized is that I was getting nervous. Like, I would be getting like, I need to go outside. And I couldn't figure out why. And so I would go outside and, I'm fine. And I told Thozi, it's the noise. I identified that a European person is more affected by inside noise. And I identified that this is probably a problem I would have never understood if we had not had Ruhi. So I would, for the first few times, I would say, okay, I'm going to go out, and I'll come back in a few minutes. And I'd go where it's quiet, and I'd come back in. And then in about 3 weeks, I didn't have to go out anymore. I could just appreciate the exuberance and love and the interaction. But I think these are little things that we don't know are cultural unless we conflict with another culture, unless we have that exposure. And then we can kind of sort it out.
Yes.
Okay, I'm having that reaction because European people sit quietly and it's much more boring, not as exciting. And so how wonderful that I was able to be exposed to that understanding and that I could help myself grow. And so that's the call I have, is for each of us to really look. It's not just color, but it's culture, whatever culture. We can be the same color and have different cultures. And that's very true. So just for us to get together with people who are not like ourselves, to build this. If we are one family in one household, we can't do it from afar.
Right.
We've got to be friends.
Yes.
And when you're friends, you may hurt each other. In this path of getting to know people can be hurtful because we don't know each other at that level. And so we have to be willing to take a risk where we're uncomfortable until we get comfortable. And so that's what I think is the value that I have found for myself in the Ruhi that we have had. I learned much more than the youth. They taught me.
What I learned also was the ability for us to create friendships within our neighborhood. It got to a point where one of the sons of the lady that came would call me in the morning. "Uncle Thozi, I missed the bus." And I said, "Okay, are you at home?" "Yes." I would get in the car and go get him and take him to school. How would I have had that kind of opportunity to be of small service to him? He had missed the bus. The mom had gone this way and the other gone. Who is he going to call? He knew he would call Uncle Thozi because he had been coming to the Ruhi. That's what I mean when I say we are learning, like she said, we are learning to be better people all the time. And this Ruhi enabled us to really become friends with people that are practically within walking distance, of our home, And I love that. They know we are friends with them. They're not Baha'i, and we don't care if they're Baha'i or not. But we've had this friendship now, with these families that will last forever.
And it's not just about coming to a meeting. And I think Pat was mentioning, we were talking earlier, it's not just about coming to a meeting and saying some words and leaving. If we don't become involved in each other's lives, so comfortable that we can ask each other help, we can and we can be there for each other. So that really is the next level that this moral training must take us into, is true family relationships.
To humanity, even material service, even material service.
So
Well, certainly your story has been a testimony to service, to each other and to humanity. So I want to thank you all for sharing it with us. And I know you'll be around if folks have some additional questions afterwards.
Yes.
But Thozi and Patsy, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.